Among the Jungle podcast, where we're expanding our perception of the plant kingdom. Welcome. I'm botanist and host Shai Kaina, and I would love for you to join me as I interview incredible plant people around the world to create an audio vault of inspiring botanical knowledge, all while harnessing a deeper connection between us and our natural world. If you're ready, it's time to inspire your wild. Welcome back, Jungle Dwellers, to episode number 21 of Among the Jungle podcast. And just in time for the new year, it's 2021. Episode number 20 with Nick Katsumpis was our last episode of 2020, and today's episode with our incredible guest Samantha, the storyteller, has arrived as our first episode of the new year. Happy New Year, friends! Happy new cycle, and happy planting. Get ready to tune into your heartstrings today as we travel from Australia to England on an incredible journey of nature-inspired story while discovering how we can become the hero of our own journey. This conversation is long, beautiful, and deep and covers many aspects of how storytelling and music impact our lives and how nature is our purest source of inspiration. Today we will experience how storytelling and nature are connected, how curiosity and wonder plant seeds of joy in our lives. And lastly, Samantha will share an incredible story she wrote just for us. The show notes for this episode can be found at amongthejungle.com/021. Get ready to be forever changed by the power of storytelling and the inspiration of nature as we welcome Samantha to the jungle.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. And I really appreciate the space that you've created to be able to come on and talk about stories and share some stories today. So thank you.
Absolutely. I would love to just start out by knowing more about you. You have such an interesting history, and I'd love to know how you got started on your storytelling journey.
I had a really special experience in my childhood because my mum had an amazing imagination, and she would create experiences for me and my sister that fostered an idea and a belief that anything was possible and that magic was real and these otherworldly beings very much existed. And we went to Disneyland quite a lot. My mum's American, and she would tell my sister and I stories, and she was that mother that all of the kids would gather around, and I never really knew why at the time. But looking back, I understand, because one of my first memories of being out in nature was my mum guiding all of the kids when we were younger on this camping adventure in Australia into the bush, and we found these little stools to sit on in this little enclave of trees. And she told us this story about the fairies that lived there, and it stayed with me. It touched me so deeply, and I believed what she said to such an extent that that memory of the power of story and being so little and doing it in nature, it just really stayed with me in such a deep way. And she learnt from her grandmother. She would sit at the feet of her grandmother, who would tell her stories about her travels and her adventures. She was an incredibly adventurous woman for the time that she was living in. And so I think, without me even realizing growing up, that it was something I was learning just from being around my mum. But I always really loved expressing. Even before I could talk, I was standing on the end of my parents' bed, reciting Pinocchio before I could pronunciate my words properly.
That's so beautiful.
It's really cute. And so there's always been this desire to show up and share. And I encountered this storytelling conference in 2016, and I remember sitting there at the foot of this incredible international storyteller called David Novak. And he teleported me in my imagination to a place that I I just went with him on this journey, and I came back into the room and almost felt like I'd come back into my body. And it was such a shock in a really amazing, healthy way that I, in that moment, decided that that is what I wanted to pursue and that is what I wanted to show up for in the world. And over that conference in the 3 days, I wrote my first story, and I began to take it with me around Australia and perform this story wherever I could. And it set me off on a journey of finding places around campfires, in old age care homes with children, in community settings, around fires with drums, and even in the corporate world. I began to offer stories to learn about it and to just express it because I loved it so much, and it felt like it was a part of me and my unique expression. And so that has woven itself into, stories have woven themselves into all types of creative facilitation. I run workshops now that use story to support people's transformation and empowerment through ceremonies and rituals. And it's just been an absolutely amazing journey to see how these things complement and come together and support people's healing. And so there's many things I could say, but that just feels right to share now, that I entered into it through my family, through synchronicity, and it's something I love so much, and I'm so grateful to share it now. It fills me with inspiration.
So beautiful. And that right there just shows the power of one story. You heard a story from someone and that really deeply resonated with you. And then another person, you heard a story from, and that story took you on such a journey that you decided that was what you wanted to pursue for the rest of your life. That is amazing. That just shows the power of connection. And potentially this story is going to inspire someone out there to continue their writing journey. So it's just this chain effect. How long ago was that you had that experience and started committing yourself to this kind of storytelling path?
I really love that you acknowledge the power of that, actually, and how those moment experiences when you hear someone and you really resonate, or it touches you in such a deep way, and how that can impact someone's whole life. And he probably never knew that ever happened, to me, that's what sparked it. But I would say, so that happened 4 years ago, but there was actually a really incredible experience that came before that, which I failed to mention, and that's that I'd graduated university, and this is now going back about 8 years, and I was out in the bush with a bunch of friends in the Australian wild, rugged, wonderful, crunchy bush for New Year's Eve, and my cousin had signed me up for a workshop, and I just finished a theatre degree, and I didn't know what I was going to offer on the eve of New Year's Eve, and I ended up wandering through the bush and being wildly inspired by the nature around me, and felt that the trees and the stumps and the dried riverbeds and interesting beings that I was meeting on this pathway near the festival were talking to me, telling me aspects of their story. I was like, ooh, that tree looks like an old man that has something he wants to tell me. And that stump looks like a point that, we need to stop at and acknowledge something. And this whole story ended up coming out, and it was a walking story in nature that I ended up guiding this festival, this group of people. It was a small group at the time. There was like 30 of us. And that was really the catalyst for me to go to the storytelling conference. So that was about, 7 years ago now. And I pursued it from that place. It was like, oh, the feedback I got was like, is this, what did you just do? What was that? And I was there too, like, I don't know. I absolutely loved it, and let's do more of it. And so I continued offering those nature story adventures for about 3 years in a row over New Year's Eve, guiding people through that transition from one year to the next with guided story adventure in nature. And that was really the thing that I just fully committed in my heart. I was like, I don't know what else I'm going to do, but this thing brings me joy, and I'm going to pursue it wholeheartedly, and I still am here today talking about it. So it's amazing.
It's amazing that it resonated with me in the same exact way. When I heard your story in the manifestation workshop I was in, I was sitting there and she was like, we have this story from Samantha. She is a storyteller. I was like, a storyteller? Like, that's such, you don't hear many people that are storytellers. I'm like, that's a really intriguing thing just to begin with. Then after I heard your story, I felt that exact same way. What was that? What did I just experience? That didn't feel like just a story. I've read lots of stories and I've been told lots and lots of stories, but what I experienced transported me somewhere else. I wasn't in the room while the story was being told. I was in a Dr. Seuss book. I was in a whole different experience, this magical world where every word is a new turn and something beautiful is coming out of it. And so you have a gift beyond storytelling that truly draws you in. And so I share that sentiment from 7 years ago. What was that I just experienced? That was amazing. It feels good. Keep doing some more of that.
It feels so good. It feels so great for me to hear that it's having that impact, you know. It's like, because it feels incredible for me to do it as well, like to tell the stories. Honestly, it's a joy. It makes me feel the most alive, the most inspired, the most in flow when I get to share stories. So I think that there's something greater that is coming through to touch me and others as a gift, you know, as a gift for all of us. And it's just so great to share it. You know, that's the beauty of this, is that we share it with other people. It allows us to connect. And it has since the beginning of time. Like, stories have been one of the most powerful communication tools in our arsenal to support connection. And we've learned from stories. We've been inspired by stories. We've engaged with them. They've motivated us since the beginning of time. And we're hardwired for them, you know. We're story-seeking creatures as humans. So it creates this connection that we can all share around because it's so primal, like it's in our bodies, this relationship to storytelling and its connection to nature as well.
Yes, and it's interesting. I just thought, we don't know if foxes and coyotes tell each other stories or plants tell each other stories, but it would be interesting to know if other species connected with storytelling in the same way. But I'm also curious how the roots of growing up in Australia has influenced this path.
It's a really great question, because Australia is such a wild, spacious, somewhat rugged land. And it took me, I grew up in the city and had a wonderful experience on the beach, you know, growing up on the beach. And Australian families on Saturdays, they do something called nippers, where they're in the water and they're swimming around and they're learning about how to swim and be in nature and, you know, sun safety, water safety, all the stuff. So I got a very outdoorsy childhood experience. And then after I left uni, I pursued exploring even further than the confines of the city. And I think a lot of people that grow up in the cities don't necessarily explore outside of them. But there was something that called me out to explore for about 8 years after school. I just went out and began to study in a country town. And then I was living in the East Coast. And through my adventures, firstly, I got to connect with the beauty of the nature. And I got to start to be integrated into some what we call rewilding communities, which learns about, which teaches how to integrate back into a wild lifestyle, really, and doing that in community and doing that with children. And so I was mentoring kids in these camps of reconnecting to the bush and integrating stories around the campfires with the communities and stuff, doing it there. But my journey led me into a corroboree, which is like a dance celebration of Aboriginal people for the Bundjalung Nation. And I stumbled into this not knowing I was going, but I went to this corroboree And I ended up sitting in ceremony in a women's culture and law camp with Aboriginal aunties for about a week and a half. And I had a huge earth-shattering experience there where I realized how disconnected I was from the natural world. And I was like a learner walking around, stumbling, stubbing my toe, being swooped by magpies. You know, it was so, it taught me very quickly about how ignorant I was. And the auntie's love was really firm. It was tough. And I had to learn very quickly. And I sat around the campfire with them for hours and hours and hours learning from them. And something happened in me where I developed and realized how alive the natural world was and how aware of us it is and how great the disconnect was. And I left that experience completely changed and pursued sitting with some of these aunties and other senior law women, Minmaya from Wiradjuri, from the Wiradjuri Nation. I went through a ceremony with her, and Auntie Nellie Patterson. I went into the Central Desert and sat in ceremony with her. And so my experience of being in Australia suddenly took on a whole new reality, understanding not only the experience of what it's like for the white person in the city, but sitting and listening and doing a lot of listening and sitting and listening and sitting and listening to their stories and their songs and singing with them. And I learned so much simply by doing that. And I never forgot what they told me. An auntie, she said, we're teaching you young white women because we want you to carry this respect and knowledge of our culture with you into the positions of power that you're walking in this world. You know, carry our culture in your heart with respect. And it's informed so much of how I am pursuing my own life journey based on what they shared with me. And so I feel so incredibly grateful. My respect for the land is growing deeper every day from what they shared with me. So in that respect, growing up in Australia, I think I had a very unique experience getting to learn from them and learn from white people and go to a private school in the center of the city and get to see even just a little bit. You know, I'm not assuming that I know like hardly anything, but what I did learn was respect, and that has really stayed with me. So that influenced me and my storytelling enormously, which, yeah. Well.
Wow. What a beautiful message to just sit with, and just so beautiful that they're willing, of course, to share their culture to keep us in this understanding of respect and keeping these stories continuing on and on. How do you feel, and maybe this even ties back into how they feel, but how do you feel that these stories connect us more deeply with nature?
Well, I'm going to speak from my experience because I know that the Aboriginal people have a very strong connection with storytelling and the dream time and their songlines, and I very much respect that. And I'm going to talk to my ancestry, which is from the United Kingdom, and say that there were bards, a really ancient form of storytellers that walked this land that I'm living in now. I'm living in England, and they would wander the land and they would learn and tell stories in exchange for food or accommodation or an entertainment, you know, with the lords and the ladies. And they believed that they weren't the writers of the stories, that they were receiving the stories from nature, that actually they were the vessel that the story moved through. And they tapped into something, the imagination of the earth, called the Arwen. The Arwen being the dreaming of the earth, and they were the vessels that the earth moved through. And a brilliant man that I'm over here learning with, a mythologist, he says that, you know, the world, the earth thinks in myth. The earth thinks in myth. It speaks in myth. It dreams in myth. And so by tapping into this Arwen and the earth's imagination, we're actually connecting with her dreaming. And so I love that, you know, it takes
beautiful.
us as the tellers away from it being my thoughts, my writing, my idea into I'm actually a vessel for this to move through me to be shared with others. And that's informed me so much. Also because the stories that I tell are mainly based in nature and are inspired by nature, my walks that I go on and the creatures that come to me and the insects and the bugs and the flowers and all the stuff. But yeah, I really relate to that I'm tapping into something much greater than me from nature herself.
That's beautiful. In that manifestation workshop, I do think she introduced you as a nature storyteller. And because there was an element to it that I was like really surprised by. I was like, oh, a nature storyteller? That is so amazing. And then of course the story had seeds and all these beautiful things involved in it. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful way to get us connected back. A lot of people are just like, go take a walk in nature or go, buy some plants and bring them home, try to rewild your own spaces, all these different methods. But this aspect of storytelling is such a powerful way of connecting us with nature. And the foundation of, this podcast is sharing that same message, that people's stories really inspire other people, and listening to our voices and all that beautiful stuff.
So true. I believe that so strongly. And I think that our stories, because this is also like we are nature and we are living our own unique heroes' stories, which is an amazing thing to realize, that we wake up in the morning as the heroes of our own life journey. But how healing, you're right, it can be to hear other people's stories and to share in that place, and knowing that we actually are all pieces of this puzzle, that our story contributes to a greater story. And I've just been finding recently that hearing other stories is so validating and affirming and inspiring. It, again, shares so much. Like that connection we have with story is so deep. It's so intrinsic in us, isn't it? It's amazing.
It really is amazing that we all can kind of connect in this space, listening to each other, sharing our stories and our journeys and our imaginations. I mean, wow. The concept of the earth thinking and talking and all those things, experiencing us through this, like, myth is almost the earth's truth. I love that because it opens up so much possibility for all the magic that exists out there and for us to open ourselves up to it. That's amazing. What benefits have you experienced both listening to and telling your stories?
I feel like I've talked to this a little already. The experience of me telling a story, it feels like I'm the most animated and alive. Like there's something so true and inspired moving through me as me. And my whole being lights up in a way that allows for a full expression. And it almost makes me tear up when I do it and I feel really connected to it. Or I'll receive a story in my imagination and then I'll speak it out loud for the first time. And very common experience I have is to well up with tears because it feels like I'm receiving so much from that. And then listening to the stories, like I said, was just, when I hear people's stories, both that they share, I feel very affirmed and connected and inspired. And also listening to amazing storytellers like the teacher that I'm over here learning from, Martin Shaw. He's a mythologist and I'm learning with him at the School of Myth. And he tells these stories that go on for 3 hours, 3 days, a week, one story, carries. He's been up all night telling one story for like 10 hours, And
wow,
just
what power.
That in itself, he tells he tells us that stories can be used, and they were used and they can be used as like acupuncture for the psyche. And so they can find their way into the parts that need pressure placed on them. Maybe there is a part of us that's been neglected or exiled or isolated or forgotten about, and that the stories can find their way into us and press upon that particular point and bring it up for integration or awareness, or that there's actually like an acupuncture experience that can happen. And so he asks the question, where do you find yourself in that story? And by feeling your way back into a story, that these living myths, you're able to understand yourself just based on where you are in that moment. And, maybe an hour later, you'll be somewhere else in the story. And it works with us and through us. So there's a medicine to stories that just by listening to it kind of goes beyond the mind, what the mind can even comprehend is happening. But it can be very powerful to raise things, to transform things, to move things through our system. So yeah, both powerful to receive, tell, and listen, all round, and enjoyable, and really fun, and light, and playful. It doesn't have to be so serious. It's like incredibly light and enjoyable a lot of the time. Just for joy's sake, just telling it for the sake of joy and fun and wonder and awe and all these things that we're lacking or we're needing. It's like, bring it on, bring in the joy, bring back the joy at this time that we're living. We need that spark, that magic, that, awe, to see through the childlike lens, like, poof. I'm passionate about that.
Yes. That is a huge passion point of mine. We could just turn a hard right here and make the rest of this episode about pursuing joy and sparking childlike curiosity and wonder in your life, because I'm so passionate about that. Like you said, now more than ever, it's so powerful to pursue things and experience things just for joy. The lessons are sometimes just another beautiful benefit of it, but really, going into it with the intention of experiencing joy and feeling good, and then getting a lesson on the other side, that's great. But yeah, really sparking the joy. I'm wondering what this creative process of receiving a story, or the co-creation process of creating the story, what that kind of looks like for you.
It's amazing, because I feel if you were to ask other storytellers, they'd have a different process. I think most storytellers would have their own unique way of receiving or writing or being inspired. And for me, it has changed. Every day over the years, I'm learning more and more about it. It's like it's revealed itself to me. And I realized how different it was when I went to the Writers Award in Australia, and I was talking to a writer about him sitting in front of a laptop and writing every morning, 2 hours in the morning to write things he was, doing for television shows and stuff he was working on. And I realized that for me, I actually receive story in images first through my imagination. And so often there is a spark, there'll be a catalyst, whether it be, someone will say, can you write a story or share a story at this event or for this group of people or for this purpose? And if I commit to it and say yes, and it feels right, if just by me walking down the street, the people that I'll meet, just by me walking in nature, the insects, the creatures, the sounds, the feelings, it's like I said, there's like a language of nature that will communicate itself to me to let me know what wants to be shared in the stories. And so sometimes I'll receive, sometimes I'll turn the radio on and there'll be a song that will spark a feeling, that will then spark an image, that will show me, a set of 3 images at a time, and I'll just be traveling through the story like I'm holding onto a rope, and I'm like, let's go, show me where we're going, Like, it feels like I get I get to go on the journey with my imagination, and it shows itself to me. And I also believe that I too, and my creative genius has a role to play. Like, I will receive images, inspiration, and then we'll, offer or think with my creativity, like how to craft that into something that I can see there's an arc to. And maybe there's a gap in the story, and I'll ask, show me what happens here, and then something will arrive. There'll be a knock on the door. I'll dream. Often the stories will show themselves in dreams. So a lot of the stories the characters have come to me in dreams, and it's quite a specific feeling. Like, it just leaves me the next day with a like, these characters stay, like they've come from somewhere else. And the more that I respect them, and the more that I treat stories and the imaginal as a living space that is alive and has its own intelligence, I feel there's a greater respect with that world. And that's been a huge shift for me. Rather than thinking that I'm the sole creator, I feel like I'm a collaborator. And that's a really cool thing, to collaborate with these ideas, with these beings, with these characters. So do you know what? It's really playful. It's really fun. I trust it a lot. And I feel like I am in a world of awe and wonder, because I'm open to receive the magic of nature. And it's so cool. It's so cool.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to talk about this. Love it so much.
And honestly, that magic and that love and that passion comes through in your stories and in your characters. Of course, one of my favorite characters is the bringer of possibilities, who was presented to me in this story in my manifestation class that I took. And I love this character so much. I just have to ask more about him and how he came to be, and if he maybe has a place in future stories.
I love that you love this character. I love this character so much. And he's so cheeky, the bringer of possibilities. It's a brilliant story how he came into my life, how he came. Nikki, one of our friends, mutual friends, how we met, she reached out to me, and she was like, in a voice note on Facebook, and she was like, look, Sam, I just have this idea that you're going to tell a story at my manifesting workshop. It's tomorrow. It's tomorrow. What do you think about writing a story and filming and recording it? And I wrote back to her on the voice note, and as I was talking out loud, and I was just like, look, if the story wants to come, then it will come. And as I was literally having my finger on the button, this character comes out of the corner of my imagination, like it was hiding around the street, and started to cheekily smile at me. And I could see its hat, its stripy hat. I could see its stripy, colourful cape. And it was so cheeky. And it was just looking at me and running around in my imagination. And I was mid-sentence, I was like, there'll be a story tomorrow. There'll be a story tomorrow. That character wants to be seen. Yeah. And I was working at a restaurant that night, and just while I was, serving tables, the story got put together, and I was taking the plates into the kitchen, and suddenly, the bringer of possibilities spiel just comes to me, and I have to grab a pen and paper and write it down. And it was magic within, magic around. Inside your heart, the seeds of creativity can be found. So hold your hands close and whisper the words of your dreams. And what will arise is up to your imagination, it seems. And that came through like that, in one go. I was like, okay, here it is. So the next day filmed it and sent it off. And I've told that story a lot of times, because the bringer of possibilities offers a gift of anything is possible. If we choose to open ourselves to believe that we can do and create anything, then that energy, the bringer of possibilities, arrives, responds to that is here to answer those prayers. And he comes in that story bearing the gift of a seedling in a pot plant with that note attached, and helps a really dull city transform into a city of dreams. And I just love what it stands for. I love him, and I'm so grateful that he exists in the world. So that's a little bit about how he came. And I wonder, he has sparked an idea to write a collection of books, actually, of putting together, these allies to help us remember these important things about dreaming and being open to possibilities. So there's now about 30 stories that I've got written down in a collection. And I'm wondering what's going to happen with them, how they'll want to be shared.
Oh, that is so beautiful. The bringer of possibilities is just someone, I hope he winds up in books and videos and all kinds of beautiful places, because I just feel so many people need a seed from him, need a bit of his message, need a bit of his light. I mean, he just brings some kind of magic and inspiration. He fills me up. Honestly, that story filled me right up to the brim in that manifestation workshop. And I was just like, wow, okay. Who is this woman who created this beautiful vision? And wow, I feel so blessed that this all came into my path at this perfect time. And of course, I deeply resonated with it because it had messages for me that I needed at that exact time. And I'm sure that's how a lot of people connect to something. That story just had something that they really needed to connect to, or a certain type of validation. And of course, I was there. I was manifesting things about my botanical career and the podcast. And
incredible. And I'm so glad it came at the perfect time, His medicine for you. That's wonderful.
So one thing that I loved about the bringer of possibilities was this aspect that it had of speaking to children and to adults. And I'm curious what it's like sharing stories with adults versus sharing stories
great
with children.
Question. Children get stories. They just get it, it's such a available language to them. And they teach me, actually, with the language of story, with how they respond. They're just so receptive to stories. And they're also incredible critics. You know what I mean? If they're not interested, they're not going to stay focused. They don't care if it's going to make you feel bad. Adults are like, they'll listen to make you feel good. And the kid, if they just don't like it, they just won't listen. And so I had to, I learned the art of how to be engaging by telling stories to children, because I knew as soon as I'd lost them, I'd lost them. And what and how could I get them to follow and be engaged throughout? However, when I tell stories to adults, there's something that happens that feels so good, because I watch transition and a transformation happen. And that's that a lot of us, or most adults, have usually lost touch with their child self, or the childlike wonder that we were talking about earlier. And so, we've got responsibilities, and life's become quite serious in different ways, and we've got to take care of our relationships and our finances and our houses and our families, and these are all very real responsibilities, and often there's not a lot left for playfulness. And so there's usually a hard exterior. People will start, with their arms closed, folded. And a lot of corporate people, if I tell them a story, might have quite serious look on their face, perhaps at the beginning. And also just, not even just corporate people, but adults around fires and stuff. There's a hardness that I think adults perhaps don't even realize that we have created this shell. And through telling stories, it's like watching that shell dissolve or crack off and just be put to the side for a moment. And I get to witness this warm, squishy child self that is in all of us, no matter how old we are or what work we're doing or what responsibilities we have. It's like their faces become like children, and their posture will soften, and those sitting on the ground will bring their knees up to their chest, and they can get lost in something for a little bit. They don't have to hold any of that stuff. And I think there's full permission to just let it all go and allow them to come back home to that place that a lot of people haven't touched since they were little. And so that's why I really love telling stories to adults, because I get to watch and support that transformation and that remembrance to a part of us that perhaps was desperately craving that connection, and just to be held like that for a moment, you know? And so I get that feedback a lot, like, wow, I just went somewhere, or I just had this feeling. And I'm like, it's so great to hear. So I love telling stories to kids. They are my teachers. I respect them so much. I love them so much. It's always really fun to make up stories with kids. Their imaginations are wild. However, I love telling stories to adults because of that reason. And it can feel really intimidating in the beginning, but when we're in it, and it's magic.
Yes, I felt that transition in the room listening to your story. There were 8 or 9 other people in our little space that we were in. And so we're all told about the story. And we're like, oh, interesting. And so then the story is like unfolding. And first of all, your voice just came on. And yeah, again, even while you were just talking just then, I had this urge to bring up my knees and just kind of like hold them. I had to fight that urge because it just, it just feels, there's something about your voice and everything that is so engaging, but the story's just like unfolding and unfolding. And as the story's unfolding, you feel like these layers peeling back and more layers peeling back of everyone around you. And then by the end of it, we're all just this puddle of hearts. And we all had our independent journeys, right? Listening to a story, because everyone's having an independent journey while they're listening to a story. But yet we all walked this journey together. It was so beautiful. The story connected us all, but yet let us our own space to each have our individual experience. And man, it was just amazing. The energy that we spent 10 minutes after the story. I think the story was about that long. I think we spent like 10 or 15 minutes after the story just discussing how much we loved and appreciated the story. And it really deeply connected with everyone. And I thought that was powerful because it was all different people, all different ages, all different, demographics. And we all deeply resonated with this story and with this character.
I'm just drinking it in. Yeah. Drinking in that medicine. Because it is so really, it feels good. Feels really good.
And it did connect us all to this childlike place. It was the children in the story that really took it upon themselves to start showing the adults what was possible. And so it kind of gives you permission to allow those childlike parts of you to show the adult version of you how to loosen up and how to allow more magic in. So I'm curious of your own personal journey. What are some ways that you use or that you suggest people can use to connect with that childhood aspect of ourselves and bring forth some of that
I'm so
joy?
happy to share about this. I ran a play workshop in Sydney for 2.5 years that encouraged adults to reconnect with the childlike joy within themselves and that awe and wonder. So I got to learn about, for adults, if we have that hard exterior or, the responsibilities, or we haven't softened into that place, or we've lost touch with that place, how do we get there quickly? And there are 3 principles that can support that. And the first one is permission. We actually have to give ourselves permission to experience that. Because whatever story or reason or excuse that, I'm an adult, or that's too childish, or that's not for me, or we have to allow ourselves first to go there. So that's the first principle. The second one is courage. Because actually being in that childlike awe and wonder takes us into being ourselves. We've got to feel comfortable to be ourselves. And you see kids doing the funniest things when they're in that state. You know, they shake their bodies and then they scream and then they roll on the ground and then they skip and then they jump. And it's like they're just being themselves in the moment. They don't care. And it's actually really liberating to watch that. So yeah, that actually for us as adults takes some courage to revisit that. And then the last principle is saying yes. So people might feel an impulse to go and put their hand on a tree, or to, just do a little twirl, or to giggle to themselves while they're cooking in the kitchen. Or, there's all these invitations constantly within ourselves and also externally that require us to say yes. This is one of the building blocks of improvisation as well. But if we give ourselves permission, if we have the courage to just go there and be ourselves, and if we say yes to whatever is coming up in us, then we can access that childlike joy. And they're simple, but it's like a muscle, isn't it? By building that muscle, we get better at it. So something that I do, which is a really cool little funny thing in the morning, that drops me straight into it. And the more I do it, the more I'm there. And no matter how I'm feeling in the morning, if I've woken up and I feel great, I'm like, yes, bring this day on. Or I wake up and I'm just like, okay, another day. Or I wake up and I'm just like, oh God, how do I be in this day today? No matter what state of mind I'm in. If I go out and I'm in a natural place, you can do this in the house too, but I've got a beautiful river near my house. And I go down and I just say hello to everything. Hi, river. Hi, sky. Hi, birds. Hi, sun. Just thinking about it, it's so great. Hi, bottle brush. Hi, little dog. I just start greeting everything that I see with a hello, and I say it out loud, and I go for my morning swims, and I'm just being with that place and acknowledging what's around me. And even though, I might not get a hi back, I wonder if I just like to imagine that it's heard me, and it brings me really into that state of childlike joy, because it doesn't even matter. I'm just being me and I'm saying hi, and I get to explore that innocence for that moment. And it's a gift. It's just a real gift. And it's so simple. And that's what I want to say, is that it's so simple. It doesn't have to be these huge states of whatever. In the kitchen, I giggle to myself all the time. I'll drop something and I'll mutter something to myself and then sit on the floor and get up. I give myself permission to follow an impulse that is childlike, and it makes experiences a lot more fun and light and playful, and we can dance through the heaviness then with greater ease rather than getting stuck in it, which is easy for us to do, especially at this time we're living in. How do we bring that lightness to our days to support us and others?
Yes, and just taking that moment to acknowledge and giving gratitude that it's there and it exists. Yeah. Good morning. Yeah. Hello. Thank you for being here. Great. Excited to see you again today. Yes. Looking as beautiful as you were yesterday.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. I love it. Yeah. My husband pokes fun at me because I do talk to, all my plants around here a lot. Aww. And my little chickens and my dogs, full conversations with them all the time. I had a friend come stay with me for a month, and about a week into her being here, I realized that there would be so many times I was going around the house and I was just talking to the plants or the dogs, and of course, acknowledging her here and there, but there would be a lot of times I was just unconsciously talking to them, and then I would be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just realized that I have a lot of conversations with the beings around here, the plants and animals and stuff. Sorry if that's a little bit of a distraction, but it's amazing just acknowledging what is around, and by how saying hello to a flower or whatever it is can bring you so much joy. This last week when I was just in Denali, I spent the whole time, we have a beautiful flower that grows here called fireweed. It's this beautiful, tall pink flower, and it grows all along the roadsides and in the park. And the bumblebees love it. And bumblebees are just one of my favorite things in the whole world. They're so cute. They're big, fuzzy little booties. I just love them. And they're all buzzing around. And everyone I see, I'm like, hello, bee. Hello, bee. Hello to everyone I passed like in the 4 days we were there, every bee that came across my path, I'm just like, hello. And it felt so good and engaging to communicate with all the little bees and all the little creatures. So that is such a powerful way to simply connect with other things and acknowledge that that they're there and they're existing.
Absolutely.
And they're giving
Thank you
back
for sharing
as well.
all of that. And I'm sure that your plants really enjoy you talking to them. I'm sure they get excited for that.
Well, you've inspired a lot of new conversations because after our first conversation on the phone, when we talked and we were talking about, how you sometimes talk to or communicate with plants and you think things like, what did this plant want to be in its last or in its next life? Maybe it wants to be a butterfly, or maybe like what story did it have before it was this plant? And wow, that just took me on a journey in and of itself. And so my plants and I have a lot more interesting conversations these days.
That could be a podcast.
Yes. I'm going to have the plants on in a future episode, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you apply these different stories to different scenarios in different diverse audiences. I know you've recently moved into doing some corporate storytelling, and so I'm curious how all that plays out or how it works together.
Like I've mentioned, stories surpass all the things that we think make us different, like age and demographic and culture and race, because underneath all of that, we all respond to stories. We're receptive to them. And where they exist, there is a greater potential for emotional engagement and connection. A little bit of neuroscience I've been looking into, that stories engage the frontal cortices of the brain, which lead to deeper sense of emotional engagement. And they activate mirror neurons, which allows us to empathize with the characters as they're going. So knowing that, and again, like I mentioned, that we're hardwired, we're story-seeking creatures, that yes, there are different ways to engage different audiences, like age groups, and I've been learning the art of what particular stories and durations of time are required for each age group and demographic that engage them where they're at. Even for children, like it really spans as they grow up, what kinds of stories engage them. However, just holding that we fundamentally all respond to stories, for me, is enough to take into different places, because I know there is that connection that is true and it is primal and it's a part of us. And there is a technique that I've been using called interactive storytelling. This is so much fun, and I learned it. I can't remember the name of the woman. I would like to get in contact with her, but she taught me the art of how to embody the narrator and encourage people to take on roles in a story and play it out as if we are all creating the story together. And I loved this so much that I took it into the communities and I took it around the fires.
Wow.
And I started to create these interactive storytelling experiences where I became the narrator and I would encourage people to play roles in the story. So it was like, who wants to play the mouse? And someone will put their hand up and I'm like, great, come up here. What's your name? And then that person embodies the mouse and I feed them a line. And this works brilliantly with any age because little kids can play one character. Little kids love when the parents play the scary characters or the teachers play the characters. And then it turns it from the focus just being on me to actually we're all creating this. This will never happen again in this particular way. It empowers people to express themselves as they want to in the moment. And And they become these whole plays, even the people sitting in the audience, they take on the role of creating the ambience, whether that be with their voices, creating the sound of the wind or, the howling in the background. We make this story together. And so, again, I feel that just goes beyond any kind of distinction. And suddenly we can all engage, we can all contribute. And I was doing this monthly at this community called Castle Drumming in Australia, and they really backed me with this, and I backed them with this, and we had so much fun month after month. 100 adults around a fire creating these 45-minute interactive storytelling experiences that were just so much fun. So it's fun, and again, it just connects people, no matter if no matter who you are. It's like a really nourishing experience.
Wow, what a magical thing to facilitate.
Yes,
that's a
really
true
fun
co-creative experience there, getting to be a part of the story and also guided on it at the same time. And you can't have the same story experience without all those particular, people being there and being that element. Wow.
And then often, I'll say, and then the dragon said, "Give me back my," and then, that person can embody it in their own way. "Give me back my," and they'll do their own thing. But I also love it when people just take the character and roll with it, because then it's like, "Ooh, what's happening here?" And then responding to that spontaneity, going, "Okay, the story's going in this direction now," it can just take on a life of its own.
That is really a unique storytelling experience. I've never experienced anything like that, but I would like to. That is very interesting. How has working with corporate America been different than your previous storytelling experiences? And how are they able to use storytelling in the future of their companies?
I've been using story in the corporate world to support an event, to hold the underlying message and support clarity and purpose in a conference. Say I'm doing a speech, I will open with a story that unites all of our common experiences, what we can all tap into. Sometimes it's me telling the story. Other times I've done it, it's been interactive, and I've had them participate in activities that relate to what the characters are doing. And I've recently been exploring the power of story and how we can use that as a lens to empower ourselves as leaders, but also how to strengthen culture within an organization. And we do that we can look at the two central characters, the guide and the hero, that are in most stories, and leaders can take on the role of the guide. And we acknowledge that we all wake up as the heroes of our own journey, and their workers are their own heroes of their journey. And so how do they support them to overcome the challenges, to accomplish the task that's set out before them? And so I offer leaders both tools that they can use in their organizations, and also ways to strengthen that culture for the heroes to be able to overcome the adversity. The other way I've been working with story in the corporate world and also with companies and entrepreneurs is in story branding. So story branding uses a similar lens of a brand narrative, and there's some incredible people that have established these frameworks, like Donald Miller is one of them, and Jim Signorelli, and I give them both credit. And by positioning the company or the personal brand as the guide, you are supporting your customer, who is the hero, to overcome whatever problem they're encountering, whether that be an external problem, like I need my house clean, or an internal problem in response to that. And we and our service and our product supports them to overcome the challenge and be able to live the life that they want to live as a result of that. So that's the transformation that you can create in story branding. So there are two approaches that I've been exploring with story to empower businesses and marketing, just to create really clear, engaging communication. that can be used. And as well, storytelling in itself is, like I've been saying, such a powerful form of communication, just to create engaging connections for leaders to the people that they work with.
And I think that that's something that we all can always be improving on, is how we communicate. So I think that that is something so powerful, such a powerful gift to be able to provide to the corporate world, when that is typically a setting where employees start feeling more disconnected from upper management. Really being able to integrate that and make those people feel like the hero of their own journeys, and also having those leaders view them as the heroes, I think is both really powerful medicine for that setting. That's awesome that you've been able to use your stories to transform that world as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's an incredible tool. It can be used, and it really can be used to support those leaders to better understand and empathize and relate with the people that they're working with, to strengthen their culture and to strengthen their connections within that organization. So it's really inspiring me at the moment, that path, and I'm pursuing it wholeheartedly.
Definitely a space I think that gets overlooked. So bless you for pouring some of your medicine onto that world.
Yeah,
for sure.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if you have a favorite story of yours, or any other favorite characters from your stories other than the bringer of possibilities.
What's coming to me right now, I mean, there's a couple of stories I absolutely love and tell again and again. There's an Australian classic called Possum Magic. It's all about the Australian bush and a character that goes on a journey to become visible again with her magical possum auntie. And I just love it. It's so cute, and I tell it a lot. It's probably the story I tell the most, and I grew up with that story. It's like an Australian classic children's book. I also really love Dr. Seuss, and I think that is apparent in the story that you heard. He's inspired and informed a lot of the stories that I've written, and the playfulness and the lightness and the way that things will bounce around and rhyme. And from that, I really love the poem, All the Places You'll Go. That's a really special one to me. And I'm mindful of, all the stories that I've come through, and respecting the fact that some of them are really light and playful, and some of them have really deep, like earthly medicine to them that are quite strong journeys, big, like elemental characters. I love, and I'm loving the the congregation of the allies that are coming together, like the bringer of possibilities. There's the keeper of the keys. She's a really amazing character. She's just like, she opens doors to other worlds that support us. I think they work together really nicely, those two characters. There's the egg of dreams, and that's just, again, full of dreaming when that cracks open. So there's, the stories are full of spiders and birds and griffins, and there's so much medicine in them. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what this collection will offer, how they'll work together to share.
Wow. I love that. I think that you mentioned the Keeper of Keys. Is that what she's called? I think you mentioned her in our first call. Look forward to hearing that story someday. And Oh, the Places You Will Go. It's so funny you mentioned that. That is my single-handedly my favorite book, favorite poem. I keep that book in my car. It's been in my car since I started driving. When I was a little girl, my grandmother loved to thrift things, and so she would have all these little thrift shops around her house that she would go to and thrift things for us, for her grandchildren. And so I had like a complete collection of Dr. Seuss books. I had the full collection, every book he ever made. And she gave me, of course, my original version of Oh, the Places You Will Go. And still to this day, I keep that book in my car. I love it so much. I've read that story so many times. If I'm on a road trip, I just bust it out, and I'm like, the story just never gets old. And the older you get or the more experiences you have, the more ways you can apply different aspects of that story to your life. So it's amazing that even hearing the same story again and again can provide new medicine each time you listen to it.
That's a great point. It absolutely can. I agree with you.
I'm wondering if you have a story that you would be willing to share with us today.
Yes, I do. And in such an amazing way, when you asked me that, could you in this podcast share a story? A very similar thing happened when the bringer of possibilities came. In that moment, I think that's a really telling tale when an image comes in the moment that it's been asked, because I really feel that there's a strong response there. So this story really came as a result of you asking for the purpose of this podcast, and I've just told it in the new moon storytelling ceremony that just happened, and it was received beautifully. So we'll see how we go over the podcast now, but it's exciting to share it. I'm really excited to share it. Okay, here we go. Are you ready for a story?
I am so ready for a story.
All right, let's do this. This story is set in a fast-paced place where things move so quickly that it's hard to keep up with them. People move at lightning speed. Light and sound move so quickly it often can give you a headache. The food moves fast. The activity is incredibly quick in this fast-paced place that some people often call a city. We're going to zoom in to this fast-paced place, and in there lives the central character of our story. A young man who lives in an apartment and is embracing and open to this environment. He's riding the adrenaline. He's excited about what he's bringing and the connections he's making, and his body is moving fast like he's flying through his days, but he is riding it and he's loving it. However, his body isn't so much. And he's been noticing in recent times that he's been struggling to keep up with his friends. He's been struggling to keep up with his work. It's becoming more and more difficult for him to get out of bed in the morning. And he's losing interest in the things that he once really enjoyed to do. And suddenly the traffic and the sounds are sounding abrasive. And it became so difficult for him. His body slowed down so much, his heart slowed down so much, his breath slowed down so much he couldn't keep up, that he couldn't get out of bed, and he couldn't go to work, and he lost his job. And just when he was in that real rock bottom of how do I move forward, he got a call from his great aunt, who lived out of the city a couple of hours, and he heard on the grapevine that he wasn't well. And so she invited him out to come and stay for him to heal and recover from whatever he was going through. And that afternoon, he packed his bags and he was off into the country to go and sit with his family and heal and ponder what life had become. Now, I'm pleased to tell you that this character, this woman, she was nourishing. She would make such delicious food that filled your belly and grounded you and made you feel so loved from the inside out. And she would make hot chocolates with marshmallows, and then at the end of the night she would stoke the fire just to give a little bit more warmth. And this young man sat on the balcony being cared for by his great aunt, and he sat in the rocking chair day after day after day, pondering what had become of his life. Would he go back to the city? How would he engage? How would that even be possible? And he sat on the rocking chair back and forth and noticed the sounds around him. The wind blowing through the trees, the birds tweeting and chirping their songs in the morning and at dusk. And he just settled into a very different pace of life, one that felt good, one that was allowing his body to heal. And many weeks later, he noticed that the sun was brighter that day and that the grass seemed to shine a really special shade of green. And a little butterfly came right up to him on the balcony and came so close to his cheek that it kissed him so lightly on the face. And he felt this kiss of the butterfly, and the butterfly disappeared across the field and over to the forest on the other side. And he got up out of his chair and he began to follow this butterfly. And he travelled across the grass, and the butterfly came to the edge of the forest where there was a path. And at the edge of the forest there was a tree that the butterfly circled around and sat on a little mushroom. And this mushroom kind of jiggled with excitement. It had a beautiful aura about it. And the butterfly sat on the mushroom, and the young man decided to sit against the base of this tree and close his eyes and lean back. And he heard this hum, hum, hum. It was so deep, it soothed his nervous system so much, and he opened his eyes to try and see who was humming in the forest, who else was there, but there was not a soul around. And he felt the presence of that hum coming from the tree, and before he could think any more about it, the butterfly came and lightly kissed him on the cheek and went further into the forest down the path. And so he stood up and he followed this butterfly. Where was it taking him? And it stopped at a younger tree, a taller tree, a thinner tree, a sapling. And again, there were mushrooms around this tree, and the butterfly came and sat down on one of the mushrooms that was glowing gold and shaking with excitement at their arrival. And he sat down and he leant his back against this tree, and he closed his eyes, and this time heard a beautiful melody. And he heard this sound, and he looked around. Who was singing in the forest with him? But there was not a person in sight. And he leant back against the tree and allowed the melody of what seemed to be coming from the trunk to move through his body. Before he knew it, the butterfly came and kissed him on the cheek and beckoned him off deeper into the forest, and he followed. Deeper and deeper he went, the butterfly fluttering with excitement, landing in front of him on a mushroom next to a beautiful red exotic flower. And he knelt down to take in this flower, and he heard a song that was so happy, so alive, so gay that it brought him into his heart immediately. And the sound was like a jazzy, upbeat tune. And it was just going on like this, and it was so happy, and it just got him clicking his little feet, and he was just singing along with this happy tune that was coming from this flower. And now, my friends, there was absolutely no way he could deny that that flower was singing. He was watching it move, he was watching it shake. And you know what? He noticed that every single time he had stopped had been the presence of a gold glowing mushroom shaking with excitement. And he felt he needed to take the mushroom next to the red flower with him. And so he picked the mushroom, thanked the flower, and made his way back to his great aunt's house, past the sapling, back past the old tree and up to the house. And he went straight into the shed, where he found a piece of leather and twine, and he fashioned himself this medicine pouch. He put the mushroom inside the medicine pouch and he hung it from around his neck. He didn't spend one single day One more day in that chair. He was out in nature. He was out exploring. And when he would come close to any tree, plant, bird, creature, he could hear their song. He could hear the songs that the trees were singing. He could hear the songs that the grass was humming. He could hear the sweet songs of the bird as they hummed under their breath. And he healed very quickly in this time. He was out and about and breathing in the awe and the wonder and the magic of the natural world around him. Now, while he was healing in this time, he was also starting to receive recurring dreams, which verged a little on nightmares, for he was dreaming about the trees in the city and their sighing, and their crying, and their wailing, and he woke up with this distress. The trees in the city weren't happy, and he didn't know why. But one thing he did know was that he had to go back soon. And in his last week staying at his great aunt's house, a neighbour came around to look after the veggie patch and give it a trim and water it and fertilise the soil. And this elderly man came in and was looking after the carrots and the cauliflower. And the young man walked up to him and he could hear the songs that were coming from the veggie patch, and they were angelic. They were so sweet. They were so light. They were so pure. And the man was singing back to them. The elderly man was harmonizing with the veggies, and he walked up just taking in this sight. And the elderly man turned to them and said, "They make a beautiful song, don't they?" And the young one turned back and said, "You can hear them too? You can hear the sounds? You can hear the songs? You were singing with them?" And he said, "Yes, it requires a certain level of listening, deep listening, a receptivity and a willingness. But yes, I can hear their songs too. And so can you." And he said, "The source of the song, the source of this tune, the source of this harmony lies deeply in the heart of that forest. And the answer to your dreams will be revealed if you go to visit. There is a message waiting for you. But make sure and ensure that you offer something, that you bring something as a gift to leave at the foot of the great being, the heart of the sound of peace that we hear." The young man did not hesitate. He went straight in. He lovingly thanked and farewelled his great aunt. He packed his bag and he was off. And the butterflies, not one, not two, but a pack of them came around him and escorted him down that path. And he walked past that old tree and past that sapling and past the exotic red flower. And he made his way deeper and deeper into this forest. And the sounds that came around him became more enchanting as he moved deeper, and the choir of birds were harmonizing in a way he'd never heard before. And as he made his way even deeper, it sounded like the entire forest was serenading him with the sweetest song. And he came out to a clearing just as he thought it couldn't get any more beautiful. And in this field, there were thousands of mushrooms, glowing and gold and excited to greet him. And he wandered out into this field in awe of what stood in the middle, the most incredible, grand, old pine tree, keeper of the song, keeper of the peace, stood there in all his glory. This amazing grandfather tree was there, roots so deep, so vast. And the young man approached this tree, tears streaming down his face, the music moving through him, and he came and he put his hands on the base of the tree. And he paused and he let this sound wash through him like a wave. And he remembered what the elder had told him: offer a gift of gratitude. And he took off his necklace with the mushroom, with the leather, with the twine, and he tied it on one of the branches. And he lay back down into the mushrooms and allowed the music to bathe him, to heal his body. And he opened his eyes after some time and he said, I've come here. I've come to receive a message. What would you like to share with me? What would you like to tell me? And the answer came not in the form of words, but in a seed, a pine cone dropping down and landing on his heart space. And the seed, through its feeling, told him, you will plant me in the city. You will plant my brothers and my sisters in the city. You will plant the seeds from the tree of peace and sing them up from the ground. And by doing so, a new song will be created. A new harmony will be born. And suddenly, seed, pine cone after pine cone began dropping around him and moving all about him. And he stood up, gathered the pine cones, put them in his backpack, knelt down to the tree, offered his gratitude, and walked away down another path and off to the city. And after a couple of hours of journeying, he arrived at the outskirts of suburbia and he knelt down to plant his first pine cone. And in doing so, he began to sing. He sang a sweet, sweet song, and the pine cone quickly began to grow from seed to seedling to sapling to tree and sing back to him a really beautiful song, like in call and response, you know. And suddenly, the trees began to mirror this sound. But he didn't wait. He knew his mission was large and he walked further and he continued as he entered deeper into the heart of the city to plant these seeds in the ground, to sing them up and to hear their song sung back in return, carrying the medicine of that central grandfather pine tree with him. And as he traveled deeper and deeper into the heart, he could feel the songs around him beginning to change from that wailing and that crying and that sighing into something that actually was inspiring and melodic and tuneful and hopeful. And he arrived at the center of the city with the final pine cone. And he knelt down and he planted it in the park. And he sang such a heartfelt tune to this seed and he watched it spring up in a matter of moments. And he heard the harmonies. And almost in a call and response, the central tree sang, kum, kum, le, 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 le. And the trees around responded, kum, kum, le, le. And he sang again, kum, kum, le, 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 le. And the trees responded, kum, kum, le, le. And it continued, kum, kum, le, 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 kum, kum, le, le. Kum, kum, le, 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 kum, kum, le, le. Kum, kum, le, 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 kum, kum, le, le. Kum, kum, le, 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 kum, kum, le, le. Kum, kum, le, 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 kum, kum, le, le. Kum, kum, le, 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 kum, kum, le, le. This sound traveled and it didn't impact only the trees. The people began to change their tune, and as they walked, they began to embody this air and aura of celebration as they moved through the streets. And people came out tapping their feet, not knowing why, humming tunes, not knowing why. People stopped what they were doing just to smile at each other. There was a different feel in the air with this song. Now he returned to his apartment and he could look out over the city from where he lived. And he made sure he kept one tiny pine cone seed to plant in a little pot plant in his house. And from that grew a tiny little pine tree. And they sang to each other day after day after day the sweetest tunes, and looking out over the cityscape to see the new song that was being sung. the way that people were moving, the peace that was being shared and restored in people's hearts. And this brings us to the end of this really beautiful tale about the peaceful song from the grandfather tree in the heart of the forest. May this song bless all of those that hear it. May this story bless all those that hear it. May this story bless the one that told it. And may this story encourage nature to grow, to flourish, to bounce back, to be healthy, to be remembered. May we remember our connection to nature. And may we sing our seeds up with pride.
Absolutely beautiful. There's so much that personally hit home for me in that story. Also, just so beautiful how many of the things that we've spoken about even during this interview also weaved their way in to the power of what a song can do, a seed can do, a story can do, and how those seeds and stories and songs create more seeds and stories and songs, and it just goes on and on and on to spread that message and that medicine on to all those who really need it. I feel confidently that that story touches others as deeply as it touched me, but personally, thank you. Thank you so much for that space and for allowing the story to come through and for sharing it with us. I'm very, very thankful for this story and for your other stories and how each of them have impacted me in their own individual way.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel so deeply connected to you and connected to others through each of them. I feel connected to all the people that I sat in that room with the first time I heard one of your stories, and I already feel connected to all the people who are going to hear this story and benefit from it into the future, as long as this podcast lives and as long as the story lives, because it's my hope that this seed then inspires other people to share this story and to share their stories and to keep this going on and on and on. So thank you for starting that chain reaction. I'm beyond grateful.
Oh, thank you. I feel really moved in how much medicine is here for us through this, in how beautifully you've received it. And it was an absolute pleasure to share that, like really with my whole heart, an absolute pleasure. Oh man, I'm just here. I'm letting it all soak into my body right now. Thank you. Let it land.
Yes, it does feel good to take a moment to just absorb it all and to see how we can talk about all of these things over an hour and a half, and then a story can come in and weave it all together in this brief, powerful moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt tickled by the kiss of the butterfly, and I felt the jiggle of the glowing mushrooms. You know, I felt the resonance of the Om. I felt the flow of the music. The power of story is one thing. The power that you have, the gift that you have in telling stories is something altogether next level. To truly be able to be so present. The word transport was a great word choice by you that you used earlier. To be able to transport right into that story and feel those things so deeply and connect with nature in these magical ways, singing a song with them, it almost leaves you with this appetite for more stories and for more music and for all the beautiful things that you share. I told you the first day after we became friends on Facebook, I went through and listened to all your videos for like an hour and a half. It was just like story after story. Like each one of them fills you up so much, but then still you just have this like appetite to know more of your characters and to share more of their experiences and learn some of the lessons that they've learned through them. And it's just so beautiful that you're a vessel for all of these creatures and characters and stories, and for the earth to communicate back to us, through you. And so you are just an absolute earth angel and blessing. And I'm just particularly thankful for your beautiful stories as they connect with me in a way that is very personal and very, very special.
Thank you. Thank you for that reflection. Really. I'm amazed that we're on a podcast right now, because the depth of feeling is quite extraordinary. It's a beautiful thing to share in this place and in this way with you. And I really do hope that for anybody that's listening, that this offered you a gift that you may have needed, or some insight, your connection to yourself, to your dreams, to nature, in however that shows itself. I know that the magic will work with you exactly how you need it. And so it's really been an honor to share this, and allow this ripple to continue and allow these seeds to continue to grow. I really hope that this story, and perhaps what I've shared throughout this talk, offers an opportunity to connect with nature with more respect. Because I didn't get to experience or be educated when I was growing up about how to respectfully engage with nature. And through learning from those that are deeply connected with the land and are a part of the land, the Aboriginal people of Australia, my deep, heartfelt respect goes out to them. And I hope that we can take this respect, whether it be placing our hands on a tree, singing a song, saying hi to the things in the morning. I feel to offer, there was something that was taught to me about how to respectfully engage with the landscape. And they told me, some aunties, they showed me how to put my hands on the earth and connect with my feeling, my intention, deep respect to the land. And you can do that without words. You can just feel the earth and feel her aliveness. And then they taught me to introduce myself. They said, you wouldn't go into a house without permission or without introducing yourself to who lived there. So why is it any different in nature? Put your hands on the earth and let the earth know, after you've felt her presence, that, hi, I'm Samantha. I come from this place, and this is my intention for being here. My name's Samantha. I come from a place called Sydney, or Gadigal country. And my intention for being here is to connect with you, to be in nature. I come with peace in my heart. Simple, simple, simple. But just that alone, there's something that shifts. And it's such a powerful and simple practice of nature connection, deep nature connection, that I really offer as a gift, and perhaps something, a way to engage respectfully with the nature around us, because it's so alive and magical and aware of us. Yes. It's just like very powerful.
That's beautiful advice to share. Be more appreciative and gracious of all that Earth gives us.
So beautifully put.
Love for you to share what other offerings you have, where we can continue to follow you and pursue your stories and just receive more of your blessings.
Oh, the best way to follow me would be on Instagram, and my handle is at Samantha Rose Storyteller, and I post stories on that, and both in my live stories, but I post stories and obviously photos and just things that I'm experiencing and how I'm connecting with nature. And I've also created an online storytelling community called the Home of Hearts, And I run monthly new moon storytelling ceremonies where there is an original story that comes through for that group every single month. And we hold it in a container of dreaming, of planting the seeds, much like the story, planting the seeds that we wish to cultivate and grow over that moon cycle. And it's free to be a part of that group. It's private, but you can find it through me on Instagram and personal message me and join that group. And it's just a container for connection and stories and magic, and then the ceremonies. And I work as well, both, as I mentioned, in the corporate world, speaking at events and working. I've just started working with companies and entrepreneurs as a story brand consultant. So I'm helping companies and people tell their stories in a clear, engaging way that really connects with the people that you're wanting to speak to, your heroes, the heroes of your company's story. And lastly, I'm working with people one-on-one in a mentorship guide experience where I'm helping people zoom out and see their life as the heroes of their journey and finding where they are in their life journey and finding those tools and those resources to support them on where they're going, acknowledging where they've come. And this is a really powerful tool to help with life transitions. So using story in many different ways, but the best way to follow the stories and to stay in contact is through Instagram at Samantha Rose Storyteller. And yeah, you can find out more information there about all this stuff. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for your medicine. All those different avenues of sharing stories are all so powerful and really allows an opportunity to pretty much meet everyone where they are. It's been beautiful time spent together, and I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I look forward to more stories, more connection, more magic, more joy, more childlike wonder, and songs and stories.
All the joy and childlike wonder, so please.
I know. Bring it on. Bring it on. Yes. So good. Oh, thank you.
It's truly incredible how impactful a single seed and a single story can be, isn't it? As Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the creation of 1,000 forests is within one acorn. We just have to remember that we are also acorns. My challenge for you this week is to take a moment to put your hand to the earth or to a tree and take a moment to connect. If you feel called to, share a photo with us on Instagram by tagging Among the Jungle. And be sure to keep up with us there, where I do lives, challenges, IGTVs, and giveaways, as well as TikTok at Among the Jungle for short videos on plants, planet, and positivity. Be sure to follow Samantha Rose Storyteller, that's samantha.rose.storyteller, on Instagram, and join her incredible group, Home of Hearts, on Facebook. You won't want to miss out on the incredible new moon ceremonies that she hosts. All the links mentioned above and more can be found at the show notes for this episode at amongthejungle.com/021. If you love the story Samantha shared with us, be sure to reach out to her and share this podcast with your favorite plant friends. I hope this episode inspired your wild, and I hope you feel inspired to ground yourself even deeper into nature. Take a walk. Press your hands and feet into the earth. Let the earth heal you while working her magic. Plant seeds, share stories, and always, always, always pursue childlike joy and curiosity. Until next week, Jungle Dwellers, love, light, and aloha. I am so grateful to the plants that bless this beautiful earth, and to you for choosing to nurture a wild place inside of your heart. I hope this episode inspired your wild, and I'd love to hear your feedback, suggestions for future guests, and other botanical notes at amongthejungle.com or Among the Jungle on Instagram. It's been lovely exploring this exotic world with you today, and I look forward to where the journey takes us next week. Mahalo for tuning in, and stay wild.